If you have already watched the video on e-receipts, you'll find that much of the next couple of minutes are the same, and that's because the setup process is the same. I apologize for repeating here if you've already heard it, but it's here for those who are starting with this video about ePledge statements. If you have any questions about how pledge statements in general are used, it might be a good idea to view the video on pledge statements, then come back to this video. The next step in the process is to set up an ePledge statement template. It's a separate template from your printed pledge statement template, although it can look similar. Synergy staff will work with you to set up that template. It's important to remember that the pledge statement is an emailed statement that the donor will receive in their email and may or may not print out. It is not a printed statement that will be emailed as an attachment. Since the donor is responsible to print out the email, the look of the statement will depend on their ability to print from their email program. Therefore, it's a good idea to keep the layout simple. The goal is to provide them with a statement that updates them on their pledge information and thanks them for their donation. It will probably never look as good as your printed statement when and if it's printed. Denari determines which donors will get printed or emailed statements based on that donor's preference, and that can be selected by you internally, or the donor can make that selection through their online community account. So the next step is to set up the preferences for each donor. But first you must decide what your philosophy will be toward pledge statements. One option is to decide that all donors with an email address will get e-pledge statements, whether they state that as their preference or not. Or you could decide that all donors would get printed statements unless they tell you differently. We can set that global setting for either of those policies when setting up your template. And it can be changed later if needed. If no preference is set for a donor, Denari will default to the global setting. Let's assume now that all of your donors will get printed statements unless they tell you they want the emailed version. Once you know their preference, you're ready to set them up, and it's fairly simple. Click on the Names link on the left, and then Name List Management, and select the donor's name record. From here, we'll click on e-correspondence emails, and if they don't already have an email address here, you can click Add New to create a new one. I'll select one that's already here. You'll fill in the email address and choose a status. New here simply means that this email address has never been used by Denari to send an email. Once that happens, it will change to active, and you can set it to active here if you'd like. The last thing you need to do here is hit the Make Primary button in the upper right section of the page. That will cause this email address to be the one that Denari uses for e-receipts. And now click Save. Now we can set the preference by clicking e-correspondence Preferences, and then select the email address that we want to use in that field. And on the right, we'll select the delivery method. And again, hit Save. From now on, Denari will not produce a printed statement when you run pledge statements. Just like printed pledge statements, you can choose to send statements to only a select group of people using a pledge segment. For example, you may decide to only send them to those who are behind in their pledges, or you could only send them to those who are more than 90 days behind. All of the filters of the pledge segment are available to you. For more information about Pledge Segmenter, you can view that video found on the video menu page. To run ePledge statements, we'll click on the email button on the left and then select ePledge statements. First, select the letter body that you have already created. The statement template can have a place for the salutation at the top with a letter body just below that, and then the pledge information at the bottom of the statement. You'll create that letter body that you'll use here by clicking on the plus tab at the top and then Letters. Next, enter a calculation date. Usually that's today's date. However, there could be fields on your template that calculate the values as of this date, but usually that's not the case. Today's date most of the time will work well. If you want to filter the statements to limit who you will be sending them to, as I mentioned earlier, you can select your pledge segment here. You will, of course, already have created that. If you leave this field blank, Denari will produce ePledge statements for all open pledges in your data. The name segment to exclude field allows you to remove some donors from the process. For example, you might not want to send statements to people who are on your board. You could create a classification called board and assign that to each of your board members. Then create a name segment using that classification in classes in and select it here. When you run the e-statements, Denari will first run the name segment and find those name records with that classification and remove them from the output here. Of course, you could use any of the filters in Name Segmenter to remove names from the statement process. Again, for more information on Name Segmenter, you'll find that video on the video menu page. Once this form is filled out, click the Submit Request button over on the right. At this point, Denari does not send the emails. It only creates the job that will be awaiting your approval. The reason for the approval process is to give you a chance to review the statements before they're sent. To approve them, you'll click on the email button here on the left, and then eCorrespondence Job Queue. Here you find the jobs that are awaiting approval. Under the View column, you'll see the link that allows you to open the job and review the statements. Once you're satisfied that the statements are ready to go, you can click anywhere in this row to open the approval form. Simply enter the approval code, and then at the top of the page in the Quick Actions menu, click on Approve Job. The emails are now being sent, and at this point there's no going back. They can't be retrieved. So where do you get the approval code? For that, we'll again click on the email button on the left, and then eCorrespondence Control Record. In the Authorization Information section, you'll find the button to change the code. Click that, enter the new code or password, and then click the Change Password button. Sometimes there's a problem with an email address and those emails may bounce. When that happens, you will usually get an email telling you that your email to a specific person has been returned or bounced. Sometimes, though, you may not get the bounce notification email. So how do you know when email is bounced and who are the donors? Again, click the email button here on the left, and then click on Smart Email Dashboard. Here we see a list of jobs that are awaiting approval in the upper left box. You can run them from here just as you did from the eCorrespondence page. It's basically the same thing. Below that, you find the Recent Jobs box. This will list jobs that have been recently sent. I don't have a job here because this is the demo company, but notice the columns: sent on, sent, bounces, and resend bounces. When there's a job listed here, you'll find a number in the bounces column that shows you how many bounces there were from that job. You can click on the link anywhere in this row to see a report showing other information about the job. You can also click on the little number in the bounce field, if there are any, to run a report that shows you the names of the donors and their email addresses that have bounced. You can now take steps to correct the problem or change their preferences to printed only so that they can continue to get pledge statements. Of course, you can click on the numbers in the other fields for information related to those fields as well. You also have a resend link that appears when there are bounces. Clicking that will resend that statement. Of course, depending on the original problem that caused it to bounce, it may bounce again. This concludes this video on ePledge statements. If you have any questions, please contact tech support through the help button at the top of the Denari page.